afternoon, evening, whatever it might be, wherever you are when you are listening to this. 40 Waters, appreciate you tuning in, checking it out. Whether you are watching or listening, I really appreciate you giving me some of your time today, whatever day that might be. Really excited about the episode today, but as usual, I am going to throw all of this stuff up front. I think I even have a shorter, more condensed version of my self-shill that I like to do to y'all. Please, if you have a chance, go over to 40watt.com or linktree/40watt podcast. Sorry, I said 40watt.com. Don't go to that website. That's not me. 40wattpodcast.com or Linktree. Links are down below in the description of the episode or in the description of the video. There you can find all of my links. You will find links to social media. You will find links to Patreon. You will find links to my Reverb affiliate program. You will find links to our new, semi-new Discord server. You can come hang out with us. You do not need to be a Patreon supporter to hang out in Discord and just talk to us, although Patreon supporters do get a little extra privilege and extra chat room of their own. And go over to Patreon, patreon.com/40watt podcast, where for as little as $3 a month or as much as you want to give, you can support this podcast. And at the same time, you can help support a really great charity. This year, I'm giving 25% of the proceeds of my Patreon to St. Jude Children's Hospital in Memphis, Tennessee. It's a charity that I've raised money for years. I'm a big believer in the work they do. If you don't understand how important St. Jude is, you should go check out how much they alone have reduced mortality rate for children in cancer treatment. It's really unbelievable. I think they are one of the most worthy charities out there in the country. So go check that out. I added some new tiers to the Patreon. So here's what's going to happen this week. I have introduced a $5 tier where for $10 a month, you are going to get all of the stuff for the regular Patreon supporters. You're going to get the extra channel in Discord. You're going to get the stickers. You're going to get extra notice of any new merch or anything going on, but you're also going to get an extra episode every week. I don't know what that's going to be every week. Sometimes it's going to be extra content with whoever my guest is. Sometimes it'll be someone else completely different. It could be, I could do rapid fire questions with my guests. I could do an album review with someone else, or who knows what it'll be on a given week, but you will get extra content every week for your support, and I really appreciate it. That is, and I did add a really crazy high tier. If anybody's really insane, for $50 a month, I will give you a music lesson every month, live. Well, I can teach you music theory. We can talk guitar. We can talk bass. I will pretend to teach you keys if you want. I don't really care. If you just want to sit and bullshit for 30 minutes, I will do it. If anyone's insane enough to take that tier, that'd be awesome. I will also send you a t-shirt and you can be on the podcast. I don't care. It'll be awesome. So I think I'm done now. That's my self-shill. I think I got it in under 4 minutes. So that's pretty good. So now we're going to move on to the real reason anyone's probably listening to this. Today's episode, I've got Ryan from Demos in the Dark on the show. Super pumped to have him come talk to me. He was just before this episode went out on the Guitar Knobs podcast, and I heard him talk, and I realized I'd never really heard Ryan. I never heard your story until I heard you on that podcast. I've been watching your demos for a while, but
right on.
Yeah. So I know you shared it on Guitar Knobs, so I'm not gonna force you to go through all that again, but give the Reader's Digest version. How'd you get into this?
Well, I work for, first off, also, I'm really glad to be here. So thank you for having me. Side note, I used to teach lessons when I was in college to a lot of young kids. And one of them, he was the hardest kid to teach. And cause he would get in the room, his parents would leave, and then he would just go bonkers. And I started to notice that every time he showed up, he was wearing a different uniform. It's he showed up, he was wearing soccer. The next time he showed up, he was wearing basketball stuff. And I finally pulled his mom aside at one point. I went how much is this kid involved in? Cause he was 10. And she listed a litany of things that this kid was involved in. And, so guitar lessons was like the least of this kid's concerns.
Yeah.
And so I worked out a deal with him. And I said, if I will give you really small things to learn, really, really small things to learn, if you can learn them and have them ready by the time you come to the next lesson, we can go through that. I'll introduce the next thing. If we can do that in 5 minutes, you can spend the rest of the 25 minutes watching television.
Did it work?
Worked. That's all the kid wanted. That's all the kid wanted. I'm like, 5 minutes is enough to show your parents that you're doing something. Yeah. And if you need 25 minutes to be a kid, take it. Take it here. Just give me that 5.
Absolutely.
So I was thinking about that as you were talking about, I'll pretend to do keys and whatever.
It's a great point. I used to teach lessons like years and years ago. I taught right after I got have a music degree. I got it from a small university in Mississippi. And after college, to make money, I taught lessons. It actually ended up in a job with me teaching elementary school choir for a year, which is exactly how long I needed to know I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life at all.
I'm sure you knew before that year was over.
Oh, yeah. Oh, big time. Yeah. I learned, I didn't know this, but teachers only ever really remember the name of all the problem kids. They don't remember the names of the good kids because they don't have to say their names. So, right. But no, kids, the attention span on a child, and parents would want to sign up for these like hour-long weekly lessons. And I'm like, there is literally zero chance I am going to hold your child's attention for an hour. And that's not a me thing. That's a kid thing. Yeah. And I shortened it to half an hour, and I was still like, I'm going to be lucky to hold on to it for 15 minutes. Yeah. That's the way it's going to go. And I've had to have a few of those conversations with parents, children, where it's like, I had one kid in particular, he would come in, he and his brother, I'd give them both lessons. And at some point I finally pulled the mom aside and the dad, and I was like, okay, here's the deal. This one, I can't remember their names right now. It's been a while. I remember their last names, but I won't put it out there. He's fine. It's no big deal. Your other one really needs to play drums. Like, guitar is not going to be his instrument. It's just really not. So I think he may have ended up actually taking up drums, but don't quote me on that.
So you just made those parents' life a living hell after that.
Well, I didn't have to give them the lessons.
That was beautiful revenge there.
Oh, yes. Oh, it's great. I love giving lessons. I started doing it with some folks from the Get Offset Patreon group. There's a Discord channel for them. We've missed the last couple of weeks, but we've been doing like a Sunday night music theory like circle where they just bring questions and I start to explain music theory concepts as best I can, because I have this idea for a YouTube channel, and I guess I'm going to give it here. And so if somebody wants to steal it, go ahead and steal it, where I was going to do 5-minute music theory. And basically, if I couldn't explain a concept in 300 seconds, then it was too big a concept and I needed to break it down. And so I was going to do really, really basic music theory. It's been fun. It's been a fun group.
That's awesome. I, like you, I went to school for music composition. Right out of school, started touring. And that was great. That was really good. Moved to New York, started doing session work. Nice. A lot of ad work. And the ad work has actually informed me doing gear demos, because part of what you do when you do ad work, when you're not working on a specific project, whatever firm you're working for will allow you to just basically fill up a vault of ideas, and clients can come in, and if they go, oh, I want something that sounds like this, they can pull up samples, and if all goes well, they're done. They license that to that person and it's over. But it didn't usually work out that way. Usually, people are spending a lot of money. They want something,
oh yeah,
pretty specific. So yeah. And then, I moved back to Minneapolis, got married, had a kid, and stopped touring as much. And a friend of mine was starting a little distribution firm called Mass Distro, and he asked if I wanted to just really help out, a little bit here and there. It was going to be this severely part-time thing, and I said sure. And here we are a couple of years later, and we are this international firm. We have an office in Dublin. We're looking at an office in Australia, and it became a real job. But for a while, it was just the two of us. And at one point, he goes, maybe we should look at doing some content for our clients, like video content.
Yeah.
And being that it was just the two of us, the two of you do everything. And, we kind of drew straws on it. And I drew the straw to do the demoing part of it. And the first 50 were terrible, like just horrible. And the name Demos in the Dark came from the fact that I had no idea how to use a camera. My partner loaned me a camera, and I was too afraid to touch any of the knobs. And it was set with like the aperture super low or high or whatever. I'm not really even sure, but it was an already dark room. And then I made it even darker with the camera. And so that turned into, I just pointed out the most obvious thing about it. I was like, oh, it's what I got, and it's in the dark. So that became Demos in the Dark. But also, I'm a sideman by trade, and I prefer to be in the back of the stage in the dark behind whoever the front person is. So I also kind of view that as being a bit symbolic here with Demos in the Dark too, where I like the idea of taking a backstage to whatever product it is that I'm reviewing. And, I'm just the messenger. The product is the star. And
sure. It's not about you. It's about, people want to hear the gear.
Yep. Absolutely. That's a hard lesson to learn in this, because you do start to think that it's you doing it. And for me, I hadn't fully accepted it until I had mostly accepted it. It was something that I knew intrinsically in my head. But I did a video where I rehabbed my dad's 72 Les Paul Custom. And, I brought in Righteous Sound pickups, and I had a luthier friend in town to do the work. I was filming on location. I mean, it was the most work that I had put into a video whatsoever. And it flopped. Like, it flopped big time when it went live. And, the reality kind of hit me. It was like, nobody could buy that 72 Les Paul. Like that.
Yeah.
And they didn't really care about this story. Some did. There were some subscribers who were like, man, that was great. But for the most part, I'm an advertisement, and that's what it is. And, and I do take a backseat to the product. And it's a weird thing to realize, but it also, once you do realize it takes a lot of pressure off, if that makes any sense. Like if something does really, really bomb, you can have been the one that bombed the video. I mean, that is entirely possible. It happens all the time. But, and if something just never takes off, you can kind of go, well, it's not a thing that people are interested in seeing. So,
yeah. Actually, you mentioned that on the Guitar Nubs podcast, and it actually made me feel better, because I've started to try to get into demoing and doing some things, and I'm not good with cameras. I'm not good with any of this stuff. And to be honest, like my music background is I'm an improv guy. It's where I always was. I learned to read, I learned to play parts, I learned to do all that kind of stuff in school, but my natural state is, okay, rough chord structure, sort of a style. All right, let's go. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's how I play my most creatively. It's how I play my most skillfully. But if you just sit me down, that's with other musicians. You sit me down by myself and you want me to play riffs for a pedal, I'm like, I don't know anything. I don't know. And so knowing that it's not me helps.
Yeah. And so the other thing that I learned that, I've only been doing this a few years, and I feel like I've already just learned a ton about the process. But the other thing I learned is that people give noodlers a hard time. The folks who will do gear demos and then they just shred, and I get that. Nobody wants to hear that. And I've taken it a step further. So when I go into the actual, I usually it starts with some kind of introduction, and then there's the track portion of it where I show how this can be used in a mix, and then I go into it all by itself. And for that portion of it, I have not only stopped noodling, I've stopped riffing for the most part, and I will just stick to chords. And I will stick to not only just chords, I will stick to chords that everybody knows. So the A's and the C's and the G's and the D's and the E's. And the reason for that is if you're doing that, the most accomplished guitar player watching the video will be able to watch that and relate to it because they know how to play A's and G's and C's and D's. And the beginner level guitar player will also be able to relate to that and imagine themselves playing that because they also know how to play A's and C's and G's and D's. And so that's become a thing that that part is I dumb it down as much as possible and just go really basic and just strum chords, just do that because that way everybody gets to be in.
Yeah.
And when you get into that really, really shreddy stuff and you get into that, sure, it's impressive, but not everyone can imagine themselves doing that. And therefore, if I'm showing someone a piece of gear that they might be interested in, I want to show them what it might be like if they were using it. So I keep that really, really basic. Sometimes I get complaints. So, sometimes people are like, oh, you should find another riff. And I'm like, you know what? Shut up. It's just like, but for the most part, I don't. And for the most part, people thank me. They're like, thank you for playing chords, know? And so I absolutely, Ian at Collector Emitter is a very good friend of mine, and he comes up with just incredible stuff. He also has never tuned his guitar to standard tuning in his entire life, I don't think. But he, every single time he comes up with something very, very cool and very unique, and I have all kinds of respect for that. At the same time, it's very accessible. I don't have the capacity to do that, so I try to keep everything as accessible as possible for everybody.
Sure. No, it makes total sense. And it's like I really like the other demoers besides yourself who I really like because they similar to that is like someone like Pete Thorne who's out there. Now not everybody's going out there and building a whole track of like 4, 5, 6 guitar parts and showing off everything a pedal can do, but Pete can shred. He can play his ass off. And generally in those demos, he doesn't. I mean, occasionally every now and again he'll flash a little bit, but for the most part, he's not playing anything I can't play.
Yeah.
When he is 100% capable of playing stuff I cannot play.
And I think, to a certain extent, to be satisfying to whoever's doing it, like you do have to stroke your own ego a little bit. And the way I do that is with the first 2.5 minute track portion of it. Yeah. There I take every liberty that I want to, and I do that, and that's a full studio produced piece, and that's the one thing like that's your reel them in with that thing, and then. But when it comes down to the act, and what's funny is I know I've talked to numerous people who skip the track part and go straight to the raw demo. I know people who just watch the track and skip the raw demo. Most everybody I know skips through my introduction. So, it's a smart way to cover everybody in one shot. And, it wouldn't be the first thing in the world where, simpler is better.
Yeah, and sometimes that just is the case, and it makes a lot of sense. And if you're not doing too much, you actually hear what a lot of the gear is doing,
Right.
much more so than if
Right.
you're flashing all kinds of technique and all kinds of crazy things going into it. You don't actually get to hear what's the pedal and what's the player.
Yeah.
Where's
Yeah.
that?
And, yeah. And what's funny is, I, for a while I was doing demos for Premiere Guitar. And in the initial conversation, they were like, we love the fact that you do this because you can hear the pedal. And I went, okay, cool. And I did a number of videos for them. And then they stopped calling me. And, now they have Vava doing it. And she is, she's not playing chords. She is.
No, not at all.
Not
at all.
She's impressive and super impressive and really fun to watch. But I was like, you guys changed your mind on that whole concept.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, and there's a lot of that going around, and it's like, I don't know. God, I'm gonna get off my lawn here for a second. I'm a blues guy first. I'm a roots guy second. And I'm a jazz guy third. And that jazz I put in quotes, right? Like no one's ever going to hear me play and accuse me of being a jazz guitar player. They might hear me hit some bad notes and I'll call it jazzy. That'll be what it is. But I like speed and technique and flash just like everybody. But it's like when I listen to, actually, I'm going to tell it this way. And this is going to be a complete 180 from where I was just going. But I think you'll get it. Buddy of mine and I, like this friend of mine, not many people get to be friends with the person who is their guitar goal. And my buddy Marshall, I grew up with Marshall. He introduced me to a ton of my favorite bands, and he is the player who I think always plays the right note at the right time. He doesn't hit bad notes. His phrasing is perfect. And so he and I went to see the Derek Trucks band in Memphis, Tennessee.
Sure.
And he had never listened to Derek Trucks. I'd been listening to Derek's Trucks for about 5 or 6 years at that point. We watched the concert. It was incredible, just unbelievably good. We left, and on the drive home, we lived in the Mississippi Delta, Clarksdale, driving home. He's like, normally I go and I hear a great guitar player, and I either want to quit playing or I want to practice more.
Yep.
He said, I don't feel either one of those things because the way he plays is so foreign to me. He may as well have been playing flute. And that's what I think about the Shredders or I love watching players like Yvette Young. I love watching her play. And I'm like, but her playing doesn't inspire me to play because it is so outside of what I would do.
Yeah.
And so that's what I feel about that thing.
Yeah, no, and that's a certain level of enjoyment. All in it, because you don't have to look at it from an academic level. I feel that way about Bill Frisell, where I can't begin to think like Bill Frisell thinks, and because of that, when I go to Bill Frisell concerts or when I'm listening to Bill Frisell records, I can just shut off. And not try, I'm not even going to try to think about what it is that he's doing. I'm just going to listen to it and enjoy it. And Trex is absolutely that same way. Trex borrowed my amp once. It was, we were playing a festival. He was flown in, and I think he played 3 shows that day.
Oh, wow.
So he flew from New York into Wisconsin where that festival was, and then was flying out to California after that. But the amp that he rented didn't arrive or something like that. And so, there were sound guys running around to all the other, tents and stuff like that and asking if anybody had a vintage Fender amp. And I happened to have, at that point in time, I was playing an old Blackface Twin. And I guess Trucks was like, yeah, it's like that. And yeah, super nice dude. Really, just unassuming, and really down to earth, really cool guy. If you would have met him and didn't know what he was capable of, he would give you no indication of what he's capable of. One of those kind of guys.
Yeah, that's everything I've heard about him. That's absolutely.
Yeah, you wouldn't have known that the dude grew up with the freaking Allman Brothers.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I could have had a conversation with him about the Allman Brothers. I'm sure he never would have even mentioned it.
Yeah, would have never mentioned he, replaced, took that role in the Allman Brothers. He'd never say it.
He is a heck of a dude, and he made my amp sound a lot better than I ever did at that point. So
yeah, no, he actually just played. I didn't get to go this weekend because I really, really, really wanted to. So Saturday night, as we're recording this, which would have been, I don't know, don't make me count backwards, the 5th, June 5th. Okay. They dedicated or opened the new wing of the B.B. King Museum in Indianola, Mississippi. Okay. And they had a big dedication thing. They had my buddy Christone Kingfish Ingram played it. Derek Trucks, Susan Tedeschi was there. Gary Clark Jr. was there. I mean, they had a ton of players there, and there's some really cool photos of him paying respects to B.B. King. And one of the guitar he played for it is one that he owns, but it was one of B.B. King's personal guitars. Cool. And so it's real weird to see him not playing an SG, but it is what it is. He's going to play the guitar that was right for the moment. But I haven't met him yet. I'm going to one of these days. One of these days.
Yeah, no, and you're going to be a better person for it.
Yeah.
It's, he was one of those where I was young. I was 21 and he was probably 21. And
it's actually his birthday today as we're recording this.
No way. That's cool. And I was working on a, post music school ego. Meeting that guy, I remember walking away going gotta be more like that guy. Gotta be more like that guy.
Yeah.
In every way, except for the ponytail. I
had the ponytail at one time too. I got pictures to prove
did I. But yeah, no, super, super great dude and super great player. One of my favorite videos out there of him is it's him, Joe Bonamassa, and why am I drawing a blank on his name? Billy Gibbons. Oh. And they're kind of doing the thing where they're passing the solo back and forth to each other thing. And, Billy's doing Billy. And, then it goes to Bonamassa and he just does Eric Johnson. And, really, really fast and nothing to grab onto, and then it goes to Trucks. And the Trucks solo ends up going a lot longer than anybody else's because Trucks is building a thing.
Yeah.
And just the difference in maturity. And people are gonna hate me for saying this, but the difference in maturity between Derek Trucks and a guy like Joe Bonamassa is insane. Because in my opinion, Trucks is never playing a part. He's never playing a lick. He's never playing a riff. He's never playing a run. He is constantly telling a story.
Yep. He's building a story.
And somebody like Joe Bonamassa has got a bunch of really impressive practiced scales and riffs and licks and things like that. And, economy picking and, whatever. And again, that's impressive. I went to see Dream Theater once. And the reason I went to go see Dream Theater was because the group that was opening up for them was the Dixie Dregs. Steve Morse.
Steve Morse has been a guitar hero for years for me.
Yeah. And I wanted to see Steve Morse. So I go to this theater and I watched the drag set and it was cool. It was super cool. And I watched song and a half of Dream Theater. And, in that time, I was able to go, it is so cool that you guys can do this. And this is almost like watching a sporting event. You guys are freaks lifting weights. You guys.
Have you seen Petrucci? He looks, he looks like a football player.
He looks like he's lifted a weight or two. But then after that song and a half, I was kind of like, well, now I got it. Like I got the gist of it, and now I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And so I'm walking out, and I'm in the lobby of this theater, and there's a guy standing there, and I remember he was wearing a Dream Theater t-shirt. I feel like when I tell the story, he's also wearing a Dream Theater hat and a Dream Theater fanny pack with like all of his drum keys in it.
Yeah.
And he stops me on the way out the door and he goes, "You going for a smoke?" And I go, "No, I'm leaving." And he goes, "Why are you leaving?" I'm like, "Well, I came to see the Drags and they're done now." And and he goes, "John Petrucci could kick Steve Morse's ass." I'm like, "Well, Steve Morse is like 60. So, like probably." And he was like, "Whatever, dude." He's like, "You are missing the best band that you've ever heard in your life." And I look back over him and I'm like, "So are you." And he was like, but yeah, no, I think every guitar player goes through the thing where like you start to get some chops, you start to get some knowledge. Once you get the chops and the knowledge down, it's fun to play fast, and it's fun to do, almost aerobic activity on your guitar. But at some age, I just learned that I don't think people, I mean, there is a select group of people who love to listen to that, but the bulk of the, population can't relate to something like that.
No.
And when you think about the guitar players that I really enjoy, you're talking about like the Keith Richards of the world, and he was an impressive player who did. One of my favorite guitar solos is the guitar solo at the end of Goodbye Stranger, from Supertramp. And most of it is just one note. But it fit and it was perfect. I had a professor in college too who, and I think it was actually Eric Johnson. I was really into Eric Johnson, and I remember this professor was like, can you whistle me the first couple notes of that intro to the Cliffs of Dover? And I was like, no. And he's like, whistle me Take 5. And I was like, no problem.
Yeah, exactly.
and at that point he was like, that's a song, that's a performance. And I was like, that makes sense. Like there's songwriting and there are performance pieces. And Dream Theater, while they're technically songs, the written songs, they are, for all intents and purposes, performance pieces.
Yeah.
Someone like Kurt Cobain was a songwriter. You can take any of his songs and move them into a completely different genre. You can take any of those songs and just put, you want to do a reggae version of Come As You Are, no problem. It'll sound work. Great.
Yep.
Because he's a songwriter. So those are songs, those are performance pieces. And once you can kind of separate those, you can decide what you're in the mood for, or what direction you want to focus your career on. Because I consider groups like Led Zeppelin to be performance pieces as well, because, it's like a good indicator of that is you've never seen a Led Zeppelin cover band that sounds good. Because it had to be those guys.
Yeah.
And, it was that group. And I love Led Zeppelin. So I'm not knocking performance pieces. It's just, I learned at some point the difference between the two and decided that I was more interested in nice, slow, memorable, accessible hooks rather than the shred world.
Yeah. Which it's wild because some of this has happened in like everybody wants to I'm not going to go. Sorry. I'm going to get myself frustrated. Blues World, though. It's like I grew up playing blues gigs. I'm from the Mississippi Delta. It's to be expected. But when I say I grew up playing blues gigs, people get me wrong. They don't understand what I'm saying. I didn't grow up playing Robert Johnson acoustic, 12-bar blues. I grew up having to play loud, having to play fast, having to learn to play behind your head. You better know how to play with your teeth. You better know all the stupid bar tricks that get people dancing and get people moving, get people interested in it's all performance. Yeah. To use your variations, it's all performance pieces. And so then as I've evolved and grown as a player, once you've gone down that road for so long, it gets hard to dial it back. It gets really hard because I played a 4-hour gig on Friday night, this past Friday. Oh yeah, I'm so tired. I'm so tired of 4-hour gigs. I'm so tired of them.
Oh man,
my voice was shot by the end. I'm going for notes. It was my first 4-hour gig since September of 2019.
Yeah.
So voice was shot by the end. I can't hit notes anymore at this point, and so solos are going long. But I found that there were moments where I'm trying to dial it back and be tasteful and tell the story in these songs, even though it's a blues cover gig. Let's not glorify it any more than it is.
Sure.
It's a blues cover gig. But then there's that performer instinct that kicks in that I'm like, oh, not as many people are dancing anymore. Yeah. Not as many people are doing, I'm not getting this interaction from the crowd anymore. So it's I don't even think about it. Suddenly the bar tricks come back in. And it's it's so hard to turn that off because that's what you start to think the effect music should have on people is.
And that's one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a place for that. And I would argue that you had a job to do and you had multiple tools in your tool belt and you were pulling out the one that was appropriate for that. You were, you felt like you were losing them. You knew what was going to bring them back. Yeah. So you did it.
And that's why I've got to work on, and see, this is me putting my own personal business out here. I've got this, I'm finally working on an EP, working on some original stuff, and who knows what it's going to be. But my loftiest goal, I'm 40 years old. I turned 40 in December. I'm not going to be famous. That's okay with me. Never wanted to be. But I can create music. I can play it on the road as best I can and hold a full-time job because I don't, make enough, and music just doesn't make enough, especially original music, unless you quote unquote really, really make it. If I can make enough to pay the band and not completely lose my shirt playing original music out there, that's what I want to do. Playing cover gigs for, I don't know, $100 to $400 a man, 4 or 5 times a month. Just it's so frustrating and just tiring to play. First of all, 4-hour shows. Fuck that. I'm so over it.
I don't think I've never. That's not true. I've done some standards gigs when I was living in New York, but we were snorting a lot of cocaine, which.
I did all this completely sober. Friday night I was completely sober, and so I had one shot of Jim Beam because they were out of Jack Daniels because the state of Mississippi can't get any more Jack Daniels. They're out. I did not know that whiskey distribution was affected by the pandemic, but apparently it is. But
that and lumber, man.
Lumber. Yeah, as someone who has been trying to buy a road case for a 2x12 this past week and getting greeted by the prices for them.
Yeah.
But it's, I played a 5.5-hour gig once. It was a street gig during a music festival. We had one 20-minute break. I was playing with Marshall, actually. I played bass for that gig. It was brutal. It was completely brutal.
Yeah, that, good on you for grinding that out. But, man, that is... so the gig that I took right out of college was with Vince Welnick, who was in the Grateful Dead, as well as the Tubes. Yeah. And we would do 2 90s, which ended up being 4 songs. We would do 290s and we would take a half hour in between. But I, once I got done with that and moved back into the pop world, then, then they came down to 45s, and 45 to 60 was pretty standard.
Yeah.
And then doing standards gigs and stuff like that out in New York for extra cash. It's like, yeah, it was 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever. But for the most part, nobody's paying attention to you. Like you're just there because some rich person wants to be able to show that they hired a band.
Yeah, music to be ignored by is what I used to call it.
Yep. And so, we were barely there.
Yeah.
Like
I once played a standards gig for an event, and we realized how little they were paying attention to us. We just made up all of our standards. We stopped even playing basic standards. We just started making things up.
Yep. Just as long as you're playing swing, nobody cares. No, it's not like anybody's going to know. It'd be like, like nobody in that, there were no like jazz aficionados at a Wall Street party. So yeah, but no, good on you, man. I am also 40, and I don't just physically, I don't think I could do a 4 hour.
It's brutal. I like I said, I want to get to a point where I want to do original. I want to do music with my name on it, and I want to do 45s to 90s and just be done. That's about it. So
I had a really, so I do the sideman thing, and I had that feeling as well for a while, where I was like, you know what, I want to put out a record of my music, and I want to do my thing. And I did, and I did for a couple, we did 2 records, and I ended up finding I guess kind of the administrative aspects of that being not worth it.
I got you.
And also the other thing that would happen is, we would go set up for a gig, and I would set up at pretty much the same spot that I would set up if I was just playing for somebody else.
Yeah.
And I got so much garbage for it. And, people are like, you need to be, like front and center. I'm like, but I don't want to be. And they're like, why are you fronting a band? I'm like, good question. But so eventually I gave it up, and I'm so much happier as a result. But just because it I don't know, drummers, man, drummers are just so, that band in a very short period of time went through like 9 of them.
Oh,
it's just like,
ouch.
It was just like drummers are the lead guitar players from the 80s. They're the ones who want to be paid the most. They're the ones who are double booked all the time. They're the ones who, like, they're the ones who got the ego thing, because they know, like, who else are you gonna find? Like,
I'm lucky to have a couple of drummers around here. Well, one in particular that I'm playing with now, he's great. He wants to play. He's not playing a ton right now because, I don't know, he sort of got a full-time job and sort of fell off the gig map. And once you sort of fall off,
hard to get back in.
Hard to get back in. Now, my other guy from Clarksdale, he's always on the road. He is always gone. He is impossible to book anymore. And it's because he's that good, though. He really is just that good. Been playing drums since he was 5. Was on stage with B.B. King at like 9. You know what I mean? It's like, he's that guy. He's the best kept secret in the Mississippi Delta. If somebody could convince him to go to a Nashville or New York, it's just, he'd never want for good work. Instead, he's playing for what, bars in Mississippi will pay, is almost nothing.
Yeah.
But he's busy. He works a lot.
Yeah. It's a lot of work. It is just generally so much work.
Yeah.
If you're 40, you have watched the industry change.
Yeah. Big time. I was at MTSU watching it change. I was at outside of Nashville, going to MTSU for recording industry management for a couple of years. And that was in 02 and 03 as it started the major shift.
Yeah. And so when I first started out of college and moved to New York, there were I mean, back home in Minneapolis, there were guys who were just kind of local heroes, right? And and they played local gigs and they made enough money to live.
Yeah.
And out in New York, the ad agency was the ad work was just booming. It was booming. And you do the thing where like you go into a studio to track on a
instead of them just giving you the files and telling you.
Yeah, you would go into, well, it was also 2001, 2002.
Right.
That was, but you would go into the studio and you would just you'd clock in when you hit the elevator and you drink coffee and you talk and stuff like that, and, all to record 30-second bumper, and but you walked out of there with like $1,000 in your pocket.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't exist anymore. And the truth is that music has been so devalued that nobody besides Taylor Swift is making money.
Yeah. Exactly.
And even the folks in Nashville who are doing really big things, like really great stuff, and playing with really big names, when they're not on tour, they're broke. And you'll see them. I remember talking to a woman. I was at Summer NAMM, and I had to get to the show early, and it was 8:00 in the morning on a Saturday or something like this. And I'm walking down the street towards the convention center with this woman who is hauling her drums at 8:00 in the morning. And at some point I turned over to her and I was like, please tell me you're coming home from my gig. And like, it was just like, it was an awesome gig. 8 a.m. You're coming home. And she was like, no, going to set up.
Oh my God.
And I was like, are you serious? And she's like, breakfast and brunch gigs, man. We play all the time here in Nashville.
Yep.
And I was like, yeah, I suppose you're right. I'm like, that sucks. And like it was a long night. So at some point I was like, who else you play with? And she listed some names. They weren't necessarily names that I recognized because I'm not super big into like the pop country world. But I did look them up, like after she was, as I'm walking away, I'm like, who are these people? And, like she's doing real stuff.
Yeah.
Like she was playing with real people who are playing, real huge venues for a lot of people. And, probably, not making a ton of cash. And, she probably made more cash at her brunch gig than she did playing that. On those tours. And, it's just, music it's just so devalued right now. And it's really, at 40, I'm having a hard time figuring out. And that's part of the reason I gave up too. I mean, I'll say that. I'm sorry to jump. Part of the reason that I gave up, it's the original music thing or the original band thing. My thing is like I just got so sick and tired of like working really hard on something and putting everything into it, and then having it just like it's just gone. And that's when I really pulled back into the sideman thing, or really found more comfort in that because, the guys I play for, or the musicians I play for, it's like if 2,000 people show up, I make the same amount of money as if 2 people show up, and if, I'm not going to feel bad if there were 2,000 people who were supposed to show up and 2 people showed up because it's not my gig. I just play guitar. I just play guitar for $200, $300, whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
And that's but at that point I still get to play original music. It's just not my music. I've only been in one tribute band, and it was cool. It was fun. It didn't last as long as I had hoped. And that was, I played in a Queen tribute band.
Oh, that would be fun.
Yeah, it was cool. And it was even better because like I was the guy, like they had a Brian May.
Right.
But they needed, a rhythm guy to play the parts from the records and, harmonize the guitar parts and stuff like that. So I was that guy. So I was like, I just got to like playing Queen music for, a couple hours a night for a ton of money. And all I was doing was just comping whatever this other guy was doing. And it was awesome. It was so great. We played at this dinner theater. We did a 2-month run there, and then the contract is up, and I made a ton of cash. And then I was like, so what next? They're like, that was it. We just did it for that thing. I was like,
oh man. See, so that's a thing that's not down here in the South. And I've been talking to, for example, I've just started playing guitar for this. Well, I say just started. We've done one gig, and now she's in Costa Rica studying turtles. Anyway, long story.
Got to do it.
Yeah.
Turtles need love too.
Exactly. So, but she's coming back. We're starting to do some things. It's mostly blues cover gigs, but the woman can sing, and it's a fun gig because it's making some fun music. But she's from Rhode Island originally, and she's from Northeast, and so she used to sing in a Led Zeppelin Heart tribute band.
Cool.
That's what and like she and I got to talking, and like that tribute band thing is not a thing down here. Cover bands are a thing, but tribute bands just aren't. You don't see those. Yeah. And so, but one of the most fun I ever had was it's pure cover band, but we had a female lead singer, and we did like our own take. I'm not going to say we took a lot of liberties, but we didn't try to learn note for note renditions of these cover tunes. Like, we got the vibe, we got the idea, then we sort of like bar band them up. You know what I mean? You make them work for a bar band. And I mean, I never thought I would have as much fun as I did in that band playing Britney Spears' Toxic to a bar full of 250 drunk people.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a ton of fun doing that kind of thing. And that band was some of the best money I've made. We were playing weekends where we were pulling, $400, $500, $600 a man, a gig. It's good money. And the worst part is this plays right into what you're saying, the devaluation of music, because the creator, the person pouring themselves into writing songs, creating something brand new isn't going to pull that money unless.
Yeah. Especially if it's Britney Spears, because she doesn't have control over her own money.
Yeah, exactly. It's, yeah, well, that's a whole other music industry conversation that's a mess. But it's like, if it wasn't on the radio and now there's not even radio, there's.
I don't listen to it.
No.
I listen to Spotify.
The only time the radio comes on is when I start my car and it hasn't synced to my phone yet because the radio's just on,
Yeah. And so I fought Spotify for a long time, and I just didn't get it. I didn't get why anyone would be interested in it.
Yeah.
And I realized and this was a number of years ago, but I realized that I was this is before smart TVs. And so if you wanted to watch Netflix, you would use it through your Blu-ray player. And I had a Blu-ray player. I had never owned or rented a single Blu-ray. And this entire thing's purpose was to get me to Netflix. And once I was able to draw that comparison, like I own this thing that takes me to a streaming service, and that's all I want. Then I realized why streaming music is what it is now. And I eventually, just for my own enjoyment, I eventually, succumbed to it. But I still think it ruined music. I partake in it, but that's, it's kind of one of those, if you can't beat them, join them. But I remember going to, I was in France on my honeymoon, and Spotify existed in Europe, but it wasn't in the US yet.
Okay.
And I remember, sitting in, our hotel room and downloading Spotify and just experiencing it for the first time. Um, and I didn't know at the time that like what I was experiencing was what was eventually going to kill all of my dreams.
It's weird. Like Spotify, I have this very, very mixed opinion about streaming in general. We'll use Spotify as the figurehead, but it could have been Pandora before Spotify. You know what I mean? It could be Tidal now, as Tidal's growing, or whatever you want to talk about. Yes. And this is funny. I talked about this on a past podcast. So listeners, I apologize that I'm telling you a story you've already heard, but when I was at MTSU, which I was at MTSU 02 and 03, and that was right when like Recording Industry Association of America was starting to sue like 13-year-olds because they downloaded whatever the latest Spice Girl. Spice Girls may not even been a thing then, but anyway, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And I had this conversation.
Lars Ulrich just suing
yes. I was having conversations with professors, and this is right about the time that EMI closed, like shut down. And so I told them that, because we talked about these things in like copyright law and music industry history and those kinds of history of the music industry, whatever they call it. And I said the national star is dying. It's gonna be dead. Like it's gonna be gone. You're gonna have a few lingering like big time national stars, but you're gonna have a lot fewer. And what's gonna happen? You're going to see a return to the model from pre-Elvis. And pre-Elvis, there wasn't a national star like we saw with Elvis. There were big stars, but they're usually regional, or they had an appeal within a certain market and certain demographic. It's it's like with blues artists. I tell people all the time, it wasn't until Elvis that the performer became more important than the song. Because you saw pre-Elvis, a hit song would hit the radio. The 45 would come out of, whatever tune came out. Before you know it, 15 other artists have recorded their version of that song to get it out there to try to sell records, because the song was more important than the person that sang it. And then Elvis came along and he became the persona. And suddenly this rise. Now you had Sinatra just before Elvis, and you started to see it happening there, but it really happened with Elvis. And so I said, we're going to go back to a time period where it's not as much about this big national star. And I think we're starting to see it. And so where I was going with this whole incredibly long diatribe was that my mixed opinion on Spotify is that while, yes, it has wrecked, it has been a complete and utter game changer in the music industry, I think for creators, it gave them some power, though, to be artists who would have never had the opportunity to have other people hear their music.
Yeah, you can. I mean, this is kind of a classic glass half full, glass half empty thing. Absolutely. On one hand, the playing field has been leveled
big time,
and that is cool, and I appreciate that. But what we need to have happen on the other side of it is we need to figure out how to compensate. Like you can level the playing field and still have it be valuable.
Absolutely.
And what ended up happening was just, the playing field was leveled and music was devalued. And, I didn't know that. I mean, I didn't know that particular factoid about Elvis.
That's not, I won't call it a factoid. That's my observations from the histories but to me, it felt like that was the point where you really had like a star, like a national star.
Yeah.
who wasn't a movie star, at least not at that point.
Right. Not until he started doing movies.
Exactly. You had movie stars like Marilyn Monroe and John Wayne. You had these big national figures in movies, and some of them happened to be singers.
Yeah.
But you didn't really have like the big national music star until Elvis.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of them were Robin from Little Richard.
Completely. Absolutely were. It's an interesting thing, but you're right. We've got to figure out compensation. And if you go into the law of it, again, another story I've mentioned before, but it's interesting to talk it out with someone else, is that the part of the damage that was done for artists as streaming became a thing. And I really need to look this up so I can talk more specifically about it, and because I'm a librarian and I like to cite my sources. Mm-hmm. But so record contracts are, and you know this, listener, if you don't know this, record contracts are complicated. They're long, arduous documents that it isn't, oh, you're going to get X% of this. No, it breaks it down so granularly that, okay, you're going to get X% of radio mechanical royalties. You're going to get X% of any sync licensing that we get for you. You're going to get X% of this, X% of that. Every different category has its own percentage. Well, streaming fell into a category in traditional record contracts that had almost no value to the artist before streaming existed. And so a lot of record contracts gave as much as 100% of the income from that category to the record label because the artist already knew there was going to be no money in it. Well, suddenly there was a ton of money in it, and artists saw no revenue. Instead, Spotify got their cut first, like a bad manager, and then all the record labels made all the money off of streaming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's of the little bit of money that was going their way anyway,
Yeah.
So I don't know the answer. I just see the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. The answer is you do what someone like Taylor Swift has done, and you just sell a lot of merch.
Yeah.
And you own the merch. And I have to believe that's how Taylor Swift makes a lot of her money.
I have heard the amount of money she makes on merch in an individual night, like any given concert night, and it is in the very high six figures on even a slow night.
Yeah, and that's hers.
Yeah.
The record company doesn't own her T-shirts. So yeah, there's all different kinds of. I heard. Who was it? It wasn't Bowie. It was another one of those, kind of legendary rock musicians, and kind of at the beginning of this world we live in now. And it may have been Roger Daltrey. I don't know, but he said something to the effect of, you used to tour to support a record,
right?
And now you put out a record to support a tour, and you tour to sell merch.
That's it. That's how you make the money.
It's like, God, that's terrible.
It's a horrible model. And we talk about Bonamassa, and I have a love-hate with Bonamassa. I think the man works his ass off. I genuinely think he works his ass off. I think some artists at some point are going to have to start using his model.
Well, and so correct me if I'm wrong here, his model is that he rents the venue.
Yep.
And he staffs the venue, and he sells the tickets, and like everything, like all of that stuff anything that can be under his control is under his control. Is that correct?
Right. That is exactly right.
Yeah. Ben Queller used to do that too. I don't know if you remember Ben Queller.
I don't off the top of my head, but I'm also terrible with names. So
yeah, well, he's not necessarily a big memorable one, but I do remember. I remember talking to him at South by Southwest one year, and he was doing that same thing, and Joe's doing it better. And yeah, man, good for him on that.
Yeah.
because he has taken control of his own destiny, and he's made enough money doing it to buy every freaking burst on the planet. So
yeah, no, I was down in New Orleans at International Guitar. What's the name? Anyway, it's International Guitar something. It's one of my favorite music stores, but the Cajun that he plays, if you've ever seen any of his rundowns of his gear, he's got one burst he calls the Cajun. And it was in that shop, and he had bought it like a week before I came in the shop. And so I was like, I would have at least liked to have seen it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But anyway, well, we're at a point now where we've gone just over an hour. We're going to wrap things up. Listeners, we sure appreciate y'all hanging out. Remember that there is going to be extra content over on our Patreon exclusive feed. Ryan and I are actually going to talk about gear. I realized we made it through this entire episode. We didn't talk about gear
not once. Not once.
We're going to talk about some gear over on the Patreon episode. So if you want to, you can join us there. Patreon.com/40watt podcast. I appreciate y'all listening. I appreciate y'all hanging out. Please rate, review, thumbs up, subscribe, leave a comment, all of those things that you hear everyone tell you to do on all of these platforms. And we'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and try to make some noise.